Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Wednesday, February 18th, 2026.
Great to be here.
I hope you're sitting down for this one or, maybe standing on something really sturdy. Because if there's a theme for today's stack of research, it's that the ground beneath our feet is a lot less solid than we've all been led to believe.
Solid ground is definitely the myth we are busting today.
A big one.
The big one.
And we're talking about the literal ground-like. The moon is apparently shrinking and shaking above our heads.
And not just a little bit.
Right. And we're also talking about the historical ground. There's new evidence that suggests the history books are off by about, 10,000 years regarding when humans first showed up in the Americas.
Which is just a staggering number to even think about. It completely changes the story.
It really does. And we are definitely talking about the geopolitical ground, which, it feels like it's shifting every single hour at this point.
It's a day for rewriting the textbooks, honestly. From, astrophysics all the way to archaeology, the data that's coming in right now is forcing us to just delete the facts we thought we knew.
And pencil in some very large question marks instead.
Exactly.
And we're going to get into all of it. We have a dark galaxy that, by all rights, probably shouldn't exist.
A real ghost in the machine.
We have Elon Musk trying to turn the moon into, a shot put arena for satellites.
That's one way to put it.
And we have a hardware race in India that is completely changing the game on who gets access to AI. Plus, and I am not kidding, we absolutely need to talk about radioactive horses.
And you know what? The radioactive horses are actually the most hopeful part of the entire stack today.
That's actually terrifying.
It tells you something about the rest of the news, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
But, okay, before we get to the horses, let's start with our immediate environment. Or maybe I should say our celestial environment. I want to start with this moon story because, frankly, it unnerves me.
It's pretty unsettling stuff.
Yeah. I grew up learning, in every science class, that the moon is a dead rock. It's geologically inactive. It's just been sitting up there cold and quiet for billions of years. But now, that's not the case.
It is definitely not the case. The moon is very much alive, at least in a tectonic sense.
Alive.
Wow. What this new study has found, and this is coming from data analyzed from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, or LRO, is that there are over 1,000 previously unknown tectonic ridges.
1,000.
1,000. And mostly on the dark plains of the moon, which is why they've been so hard to spot until now.
Okay, so when you say ridges, are we talking about mountains? Like new mountain ranges are popping up?
Think closer to wrinkles. The technical term is lobate scarps.
Lobate scarps, got it.
And the fundamental mechanism here is thermal contraction. The moon is still cooling down from its formation, 4.5 billion years ago. The core is still hot, but it's losing that heat to space.
Okay, so it's radiating heat away.
Right. And as it cools, the interior volume shrinks, but the crust, the surface, is already hard and brittle. So it can't just shrink down smoothly with the inside. It has to. Well, it has to break.
So it buckles.
It buckles and it thrusts upwards, creating these wrinkles.
Okay, the analogy I saw used was a grape turning into a raisin. The skin wrinkles up because the inside is shrinking. Does that track?
That is the classic analogy, and it works great visually. You can picture it. But here is where that raisin comparison fails, and the reality gets a little bit scary.
Okay.
A raisin's skin is soft. It's pliable. The moon's crust is rock. It's incredibly rigid. So when that skin buckles to create a wrinkle, it's not some gentle fold.
It's a violent fracture.
Exactly. It's a violent fracture, and that fracture creates a moonquake.
See, that's the part that really gets me. I always thought quakes required tectonic plates like we have here on Earth. The San Andreas Fault, all that. The moon doesn't have plates sliding around, does it?
Correct. It's a one-plate planet, essentially. There's no plate tectonics as we know it. But this shrinking action causes what are called thrust faults. One part of the crust gets pushed up and over another part.
And that releases energy.
A significant amount of energy. But here's the critical difference between an earthquake and a moonquake. And this is the thing that is keeping engineers at NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, up at night.
What's that?
The duration.
The duration. How long are we talking?
Well, on Earth, a big quake might shake violently for 30 seconds, maybe a minute if it's a monster.
Right. Which feels like an eternity when you're in it.
It does, but the reason it stops is because the rocks on Earth are saturated with water, or at least moisture. Water is fantastic at dampening vibrations. It absorbs the energy. The moon, on the other hand, is bone dry.
Completely arid.
And it's rigid. So when a quake hits, the entire sphere, it rings like a bell.
It rings, you mean it just keeps vibrating?
It vibrates. These moonquakes can last for hours.
Wait, stop. Hours. You don't mean an hour of aftershocks. You mean one continuous shaking event.
We are talking about up to an hour of continuous high-frequency shaking. The data from the Apollo seismometers proved this.
I can't even process that, an hour. If I'm an astronaut sitting in a habitat on the lunar surface and the ground starts shaking and just doesn't stop for 60 minutes, that sounds, first of all, nauseating, but also structurally impossible to deal with.
That is the engineering bottleneck right there. That's the whole problem. We are in the Artemis era, right? We are actively planning permanent bases, landing pads, sensitive observatories.
All this infrastructure we're going to build.
Exactly. And if you have a shallow moonquake, and these are very shallow, only a few kilometers deep, the ground motion is intense. Now, imagine you're in a pressurized habitat, a metal can. Shaking that for an hour causes material fatigue.
Metal itself would just weaken.
Seals can crack. Metal can fracture, connections can shear off. It's a nightmare scenario.
And what about the dust? I've read that moon dust, the regolith, is basically microscopic shards of glass. It's sharp and abrasive. If you shake a tray of that stuff for an hour, what happens?
You get a phenomenon called liquefaction, or at least a type of granular flow. The vibrations overcome the friction holding the dust particles together.
So it starts to act like a fluid.
It does. You could have your landing pads, your habitat foundations literally sinking into the ground. Or if you're on even a slight slope, the whole thing could just slide downhill because the ground beneath it has turned into a gravelly quicksand.
So this complicates everything. It's not just about finding a flat place to land anymore.
Not at all. It complicates the selection of landing sites for Artemis 3 and beyond immensely. You have to land on a spot that you've surveyed and are reasonably sure isn't going to turn into a gravel pit the next time the moon decides to shrink a few millimeters.
Wow, it really kills the whole romanticism of the steady, unchangeable moon in the sky.
It's a shriveling, shaking, and frankly very hazardous zone.
Well, speaking of hazards and big ideas for the moon, we have to pivot to Elon Musk. Because of course we do.
He does have a way of dominating the space headlines, doesn't he?
He does. This story claims he wants to build a satellite catapult on the lunar surface. No, my brain immediately goes to Wile E. Coyote, a giant ACME rubber band and a boulder. Please tell me the physics are a little more sophisticated than that.
Just a little. The concept is actually an old one in science fiction. It's called a mass driver. It goes all the way back to authors like Robert Heinlein.
A mass driver.
Right. And the physics are perfectly sound. The biggest problem with launching anything from Earth is our gravity well. It's deep.
It takes a lot of energy to climb out of it.
A tremendous amount. To get to orbit, you need a massive rocket that is mostly fuel. It's the tyranny of the rocket equation. To lift more mass, you need more fuel, which adds more mass, which then needs even more fuel.
It's a vicious cycle. I get it.
But on the moon, the gravity is only 1/6 of Earth's. And crucially, there is no atmosphere.
No air resistance.
No air resistance to fight against, so you don't need a giant chemical rocket to push through the air. You can use an electric track, basically a magnetic whale gun, to accelerate a payload along the ground and just, well, fling it into space.
So you just shoot it directly into orbit from the ground.
Precisely. If you build a long enough track, you can accelerate a satellite up to orbital velocity using nothing but solar power. No chemical fuel required for the launch itself. It's an incredible economic advantage.
But hold on. Accelerating something from a dead stop to, thousands of miles an hour on a track? The G-forces must be insane.
They would be immense, absolutely crushing.
You're not launching people this way. Or even sensitive satellites, I'd imagine.
Oh, absolutely not. No way. Humans would be turned into jelly. And frankly, most delicate electronics would be turned into silicon paste unless they were specifically hardened for extreme G-loads, which adds its own weight and complexity.
So what would you launch with it?
You'd launch things that don't care about acceleration. Raw materials mined on the moon, maybe bulk fuel refined from lunar ice, or very, very ruggedized components, things that can take a punch.
It seems like the ultimate cost-saving measure if you can get it to work, but the infrastructure required to build it. I mean, you'd have to build a miles-long magnetic rail on the moon with the dust we just talked about. and the Moonquakes.
And that's the catch, isn't it? That's the massive engineering hurdle. You need an incredibly stable, perfectly aligned foundation for a precision railgun.
If the ground shifts by even an inch because of a moonquake, your payload isn't going to orbit.
Nope. Your payload hits the side of the track at Mach 5 and vaporizes your multi-billion-dollar investment and probably the track itself.
So it's a great idea on paper, but a complete nightmare in practice.
At least with our current understanding of the moon's stability. It's a classic Musk idea. Brilliant concept. Devil's in the details.
Okay, let's stay in space, but go much, much further out. NASA and the Hubble team have found something that, well, honestly, I'm struggling to wrap my head around it. They're calling it a dark galaxy. CDG2.
This is a real mind bender and a testament to how creative astronomers have to be. Usually when we look for galaxies, we look for light.
Right. Stars, gas glowing, bright nebulas. That's what a galaxy is.
That's what we thought a galaxy was. CDG2 is a ghost. It was found by the Hubble Space Telescope, along with the Euclid and Subaru telescopes, essentially by accident. They weren't looking for it.
So if it has no stars, or very few, how do we even know it's there? Is it just a giant black hole or something?
It's not a black hole. It's a galaxy-sized structure. They found it because they saw globular clusters. These are dense, ancient balls of old stars orbiting a common center of gravity.
Okay.
But when they looked at that center of gravity where the galaxy should be, there was nothing there, just empty space.
So the stars are orbiting a ghost?
They are orbiting a massive, invisible cloud of dark matter. The analysis suggests this galaxy is 99% dark matter.
99%. That number is.
Yeah.
That can't be right.
It is. Normal matter, the stuff you, me, the Earth, and all the stars are made of, is just a tiny, insignificant dusting on top of this enormous dark structure.
That's a terrifying image. It's like finding a skyscraper that's completely invisible except for, I don't know, a few light bulbs floating in the elevator shafts.
That's a perfect analogy. You can see the motion of the light bulbs and you can infer the structure of the skyscraper, but you can't see the skyscraper itself.
But does this prove dark matter exists? Because I know there is that whole other school of physics. It's called MOND, right? Modified Newtonian dynamics.
That's right.
And their whole thing is that dark matter is just a fudge factor. We don't need invisible matter. We just need to admit that gravity works differently on large scales. Does this discovery kill MOND?
It makes MOND very, very difficult to sustain. MOND is great at explaining the rotation of typical galaxies without dark matter. It suggests gravity is just a bit stronger over long distances. But here we have a specific object, a clump of stuff that has mass. We know it has mass because things are orbiting it, but it has no light. It's very hard to explain that with a theory of modified gravity. It really, really looks like a clump of stuff that just doesn't interact with light.
So this is maybe the best evidence yet for dark matter as a physical substance.
It's one of the strongest pieces of evidence we've ever found. It's a direct observation of the universe's dark skeleton.
It really emphasizes that we're the anomaly, the visible universe, all the pretty lights we see in the sky. That's just the foam on the ocean. The ocean itself is dark.
Exactly. We live in the rounding error. We are the exceptions to the rule of the universe.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's bring it all the way down to Earth, quite literally, from dark matter to mud. There's an update on the White Sands footprints. And this is another one of those cases where the science is settled crowd is getting a very rude awakening.
This is one of the biggest stories in archaeology in the last 50 years, maybe longer. For decades, the dogma in American archaeology was a theory called Clovis first.
All right, I remember this from school. The idea was that the first humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge from what's now Russia to Alaska about 13,000 years ago.
Precisely. And they did it once. The massive ice sheets from the Ice Age melted enough to open up a so-called ice-free corridor that let them walk south.
I can still picture that map from my history textbook.
Well, you might want to pull that map out and maybe burn it. The footprints at White Sands National Park in New Mexico have now been radiocarbon dated and reconfirmed with multiple methods to be about 23,000 years old.
23,000. So that is 10,000 years earlier than the supposed first humans who built the Clovis culture.
10,000 years, and the date itself is the crucial part. 23,000 years ago was the last glacial maximum. It was the absolute peak of the last ice age.
Which means
the giant ice sheets, the Laurentide over the east and the Cordilleran over the west, were at their biggest. They were fused together. There was no corridor.
there was a wall of ice.
There was a wall of ice 2 miles high, blocking the entire route from Alaska down into North America. It was impassable.
So if people were walking around New Mexico 23,000 years ago, how in the world did they get there? They didn't walk through a 2-mile-high ice wall.
That's the 10,000-year-old question, isn't it? The evidence is undeniable. There were people there. So how? Did they come by boat down the Pacific coast, hopping from island to island in what's called the Kelp Highway?
That's one possibility.
Did they somehow come across the Atlantic? That's a much more controversial theory, the Solutrean hypothesis. Or, and this is the wildest theory, were they already here before the ice sheets even formed and sealed off the continent?
That just changes everything about the timeline of human migration across the planet. We're not talking about a small correction here.
Not at all. We're talking about humans living in the Americas alongside the Ice Age megafauna. We're talking giant sloths, mammoths, dire wolves, for 10,000 years longer than we previously thought possible.
It creates a whole lost chapter of human history. 10,000 years is such a long time. Empires rise and fall in less than 1,000 years.
So what were these people doing for 10 millennia? A period of time longer than all of recorded human history, from the Sumerians to us. What were they doing that we have zero record of, except for these fossilized footprints of a teenager and a child walking through the gypsum sand?
It's humbling. We think we know our own history, our own story, and then the mud just speaks up and says, nope.
Nope, you've got the first chapter all wrong. Try again.
Speaking of rewriting the rules, let's talk about something that is actively rewriting our future. Artificial intelligence. But I don't want to talk about OpenAI or Google today. I want to talk about the hardware race that is exploding in India.
This is a massive shift in the center of gravity for the entire tech world. We're so used to looking at Silicon Valley for everything.
Exactly.
But reports from multiple outlets are covering this huge surge in India's domestic AI infrastructure. They're not waiting for the West anymore.
And we have two big stories here that illustrate the trend. One is the super high end, and the other is the super low end. Let's start with the high end. Yada Data Services.
Right. Yotta is building what will be one of the largest AI-focused data centers in all of Asia. They are plugging in over 20,000 NVIDIA H100 chips.
20,000. For context, that's a staggering amount of compute power. That puts them in the top tier globally.
It does. This is a $2 billion investment, and it signals a major policy shift. India isn't just going to be the back office for Western tech companies anymore. They're building what they call sovereign AI.
Meaning what?
Meaning they want to train their own large language models on their own cultural and linguistic data using their own hardware, located on their own soil. It's a matter of national and digital independence.
But the story that really, really caught my eye is at the complete other end of the spectrum. It's the Edge AI story. A company called Sarvam AI. They're putting AI on feature phones, like old-school Nokia-style phones.
This is where the innovation gets really fascinating, technically speaking. A feature phone, the old brick phones, maybe it has 4G, but it's definitely not an iPhone. It has very little memory and a tiny, low-power processor.
Right, you can play Snake on it for a week on one charge, but you can't run ChatGPT.
Usually no, not even close. But Sarvam is using these really clever techniques called quantization and knowledge distillation.
Okay, you have to break those down for us.
Sure. So quantization is basically lowering the resolution of the AI model's brain. Instead of storing all the numbers in its neural network with, say, 16 decimal places of precision, maybe you only store them with 4.
So you make the model grainy.
You make it grainier, but it also becomes dramatically smaller. Small enough to fit on a cheap little chip inside a basic phone.
So it's kind of like the difference between a 4K movie file and a really blurry, compressed GIF.
In terms of file size, that's a perfect analogy. But if you do it right, the intelligence of the model doesn't drop as much as you'd think. And then there's knowledge distillation. That's where you take a massive genius model in the cloud, the teacher, and you have it train a tiny, efficient model, the student, to just mimic its answers for a specific task. The student doesn't know why the answer is right. It doesn't have the deep reasoning, but it learns to parrot the right answer very, very efficiently.
And the goal here is to get something like a voice assistant to farmers in rural India who might not even have reliable internet access.
That's exactly the use case. If you can put a pest identification AI that can look at a picture of a leaf or a crop price assistant that knows market rates directly on a $20 phone, and have it run locally without needing the cloud.
You unlock productivity for hundreds of millions of people.
You do. That is what they call frugal innovation. It's about solving a real-world problem that Silicon Valley completely ignores because Their business model assumes everyone has a $1,000 phone and a 5G connection.
It's democratization of technology in the truest sense. But not all the AI news out of India this week was quite so inspiring. We have to talk about the robo-dog incident.
Oh, the Galaxies University fiasco. Yes, we do.
This story is just, it's painfully awkward. So, set the scene. You have the AI Impact Summit. It's a big deal, serious people, investors, researchers, and the university is set to unveil their big new innovation, a robotic dog.
And it looks impressive on stage. It's walking around, doing its thing, until people in the audience who know about robotics start to realize, wait a second, that's a Unitree G2.
Which is what?
Which is a very popular, commercially available, Chinese-made robo-dog that you can basically buy online.
So they just bought a robot off the shelf, slapped a university sticker on it, and tried to pass it off as their own research and development project.
That appears to be exactly what happened. It's an incredibly bold move.
Bold is one word for it.
It's the fake it till you make it culture gone horribly wrong. The backlash online was immediate and brutal. The university had to issue a public apology. They blamed it on their head of communications, and they were reportedly kicked out of the summit.
It's funny in a cringy sort of way, but it does point to a real pressure, doesn't it? The pressure to appear to be on the cutting edge of AI is so intense that institutions are willing to risk total humiliation just to have a cool prop on stage.
It's pure innovation theater. And the sad part is that it distracts from the real groundbreaking work that's being done by companies like Sarvam.
Right. Okay. From funny, fake robots to something very, very serious. Data breaches. We have a report, and we need to be careful with this one because the primary source is, let's say, controversial about a massive hack of Palantir.
Right. So the claim originates with Kim.com, the internet entrepreneur and well-known agitator. He claims that a hacker has breached Palantir's systems.
And for those who don't know, Palantir isn't just any old tech company. They are basically the operating system for Western intelligence agencies. They do critical work for the CIA, the Pentagon, and heavily in the Ukraine war effort.
They specialize in data integration and analysis. They take thousands of disparate bits of information. Credit card swipes, satellite photos, cell phone pings, drone footage, and they fuse it all into a single coherent picture for analysts.
The claim is that the hack specifically exposes pattern-of-life data. What does that mean, technically?
Pattern-of-life analysis is the holy grail of surveillance. It's not just about listening to one of your phone calls. It's about knowing algorithmically that your phone leaves your house every day at 8:03 a.m.
Okay.
That it takes this specific route to work, stops at this coffee shop, meets with this other person's phone for 20 minutes, and then proceeds to a secure government facility. It establishes your baseline behavior, your routine.
So that if you ever break that pattern, the system immediately flags you as an anomaly.
Precisely. A deviation from the pattern could mean anything. But if an adversary, say, Russian intelligence, gets access to Palantir's pattern-of-life data on high-level NATO officers or Ukrainian Special Forces commanders,
they don't just know where they are. They know their habits, their weaknesses, their networks, who they meet with.
It's devastating. You can predict their next move. You know when they're vulnerable. It's a counterintelligence catastrophe of the highest order.
So if this hack is real, and we have to stress, if it's not just a data leak, it's a military and geopolitical earthquake.
It would be, yes. And it pairs with some of the other tech security news we're seeing this week. The European Union Parliament just blocked the use of most third-party AI tools on lawmakers' devices.
They're just banning them outright.
Yes. They are terrified of data leakage. What if a member of parliament is using an AI assistant to summarize a sensitive national security document, and that document gets sent back to some server somewhere? It's too big a risk.
And what about the EU investigation into the shopping app Shein? That seems like a different category.
It's the consumer side of the very same coin. The EU is investigating Shein not just for its labor practices, but for its use of addictive design, using dark patterns in the app to manipulate users into buying more, and for selling totally unregulated and dangerous items.
Like what?
Well, reports found listings for actual weapons, and even more disturbingly, for inappropriate and explicit childlike dolls. Things that should never be on a mainstream marketplace.
It feels like the Wild West era of the digital world is finally crashing into a wall of regulation. Governments are waking up to the fact that whether it's a spy tool like Palantir or a shopping app like Shein, The unregulated flow of data is a national security risk.
That's the core realization. Everything is dual use now. Your shopping data tells a story about your nation's economy and its supply chains. Your location data from a weather app tells a story about troop movements. There's no such thing as innocent data at a mass scale anymore.
Okay, let's take a breath. We've done space, we've done tech. Let's turn our eyes to the biological world, because nature is throwing us some serious curveballs today.
Some radioactive curveballs, to be specific.
Right. There's an update on the Chernobyl exclusion zone. We all know the basic story. 1986, the reactor at the power plant blows up. It's the worst nuclear disaster in history. Everyone leaves. But the animals stayed.
And specifically, a species called Przewalski's horse.
I've never heard of them.
They're incredible. They're the last truly wild horse species on Earth. They aren't descended from domesticated horses. They look like the horses you see in prehistoric cave paintings. They're stocky, with short, spiky manes.
And they were endangered.
Critically endangered. They're basically extinct in the wild. A few were introduced to the exclusion zone in Ukraine as a kind of desperate experiment, and the population is now exploding. They're thriving.
They're thriving in one of the most radioactive places on Earth. How is that possible?
Yes. And the takeaway from the study is a really brutal indictment of humanity. It turns out that chronic, low-level radiation exposure is less damaging to a species' survival than the presence of human beings.
Ouch. That stings.
The absence of farming, of habitat fragmentation, of roads, of hunting, that has been more beneficial to them than the radiation has been harmful.
But are they? Are they healthy? I mean, radiation causes cancer, mutations.
And that's the big debate among the scientists studying them.
Okay.
They are surviving and they are reproducing successfully. But scientists caution that we don't know the genetic load they are carrying.
Genetic load.
The accumulation of harmful mutations in their DNA. They might be building up a sort of genetic debt that will cause the population to crash in 50 or 100 years. We just don't know yet.
So they are thriving for now, but they might be genetic ticking time bombs.
It's possible. But for now, they are the undisputed kings of the radioactive forest.
Well, while the horses are enjoying their nuclear vacation, the rest of the agricultural world is sweating. Literally. We need to talk about coffee.
This is the bad news for my morning routine, and probably yours. A new study is out looking at the effects of climate change on coffee-growing regions.
The bean belt, they call it.
Right, the area around the equator. And what they're finding is a massive spike in the number of extreme heat days.
Okay, define extreme for a coffee plant.
We're talking about days over 30 degrees Celsius, which is about 86 Fahrenheit. The study found that these regions are now seeing an average of 47 more of these days per year than they used to.
47 more hot days. Why does that specific temperature matter so much? I mean, that's hot, but it's not boiling.
For the plant Coffee Arabica, which is the species that makes the good, flavorful, complex coffee that most of us like to drink, it's the danger zone. Arabica is originally a mountain plant from Ethiopia. It likes cool nights and mild, shady days.
It's a delicate flower.
It really is. Above 30 degrees Celsius, the plant gets stressed and it shuts down photosynthesis. It's just trying to survive. The cherries, the coffee beans don't develop those complex sugars and acids. And even worse, the heat and humidity make the plant incredibly susceptible to a fungal disease called coffee rust, which can wipe out entire plantations.
So what's the bottom line here? We're looking at a future where good Arabica coffee becomes scarce.
We are looking at a future where coffee becomes wine.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, it becomes a niche luxury product. The cheap mass market stuff you get everywhere will be made from a different species, Robusta. It's much more heat tolerant, but the flavor is often described as bitter, rubbery. It's mostly used for instant coffee.
So the good stuff.
The good Arabica will only be grown in very specific, high-altitude microclimates, maybe in controlled environments, and it will cost $10, $15, maybe $20 a cup. The affordable morning ritual for everyone might be a thing of the past.
I do not like that timeline, not one bit.
I'm right there with you.
Let's jump from the coffee plantations to the deep ocean. There's a report on a surprise shark found in Antarctica. I thought the water there was way too cold for sharks to survive.
That was a general assumption, yeah.
Yeah.
Sharks are mostly cold-blooded, and their metabolism usually just fails in water that's near freezing. But they caught a species on camera in the deep waters there.
Wow.
And this really highlights a fascinating biological concept called cryptic species.
That sounds like a monster movie title. The Attack of the Cryptic Species.
Ha, it does. But what it means biologically is a species that is genetically distinct and different, but looks identical to another species to the human eye. or in this case, a species that hides in an environment where we thought it was impossible for it to live.
So nature is just much better at adapting to extremes, cold, pressure, even radiation like with the horses, than we give it credit for.
Much better. It's a good reminder that we still know so little about the true extent of biodiversity on our own planet, especially in these extreme environments.
And we see that adaptation, or at least that connection to the environment, in a much sadder context back in the United States. In East Palestine, Ohio, a report says that dogs are being used as biomonitors for the chemical spill.
This is a heartbreaking story, but it's also scientifically powerful. After the train derailment and chemical spill there, we need to understand the long-term health effects on the residents.
But that takes decades to show up in humans.
Right. Humans live, 80 years on average. Dogs live maybe 12 or 14. Their metabolism is much faster. They live in the same houses. They breathe the same air. They walk on the same soil. Sometimes they drink the same water.
So by studying the health of the local dog population, we get a preview of what's going to happen to the people down the line.
Exactly. They are what's known as a sentinel species. If the dogs in East Palestine start showing unusually high rates of, say, lymphoma or respiratory failure in the next 3 years, it gives doctors and public health officials a terrifyingly accurate warning of what to start looking for in the human population in 10 or 15 years.
It's a grim duty for man's best friend.
It truly is.
All right, let's move to the map of the world. Geopolitics. If the ground is shaking on the moon, it is definitely shaking in Geneva, Switzerland.
Geneva is the absolute center of the world this week. We have multiple overlapping high-stakes crises, all being negotiated in the same square mile.
Okay, let's start with the big one, Ukraine and Russia. There are trilateral talks happening. But the mood music, from what I'm reading, is just terrible.
Tense is the diplomatic word being used. But you have to look at what is happening outside the negotiating room to understand the real mood. At this very moment, President Zelensky is conducting a massive purge of the SBU, the Ukrainian Secret Service.
Yeah, multiple sources are covering this. He's firing dozens of top officials for treason and collaboration with the enemy.
You have to read between the lines here. You do not gut your own intelligence agency in the middle of a war unless you are absolutely terrified of internal betrayal.
So what does it signal?
It suggests that as the peace talks get serious, the internal political fight in Kiev is getting vicious. He's removing the old guard, the Siloviki, the security men who might have old loyalties to Russia, or more likely, who might violently oppose any peace deal that involves concessions. He's consolidating power.
And at the very same time, Ukraine has blocked the Druzhba oil pipeline.
Right, which is choking off the primary source of oil to Slovakia and Hungary, both EU and NATO members. So you have this bizarre bifurcated reality. You have diplomats shaking hands and smiling for cameras in Geneva, while at the same time Kiev is turning off the energy tap to Europe and arresting its own top spies.
It doesn't sound like a foundation for a lasting peace.
It sounds like a foundation for a very fragile, very tense ceasefire at best.
And then, in another room down the hall in Geneva, there's the U.S. and Iran track.
Yes. The official line is that they are holding talks on guiding principles for a new nuclear agreement.
Guiding principle sounds incredibly vague.
It is diplomatic speak for we are trying very hard to prevent World War III, but we haven't actually agreed on anything concrete yet. Tensions are still sky high. Iran is conducting live-fire military drills in the Strait of Hormuz. But the simple fact that they are talking at all is the real news.
Both sides are staring into the abyss and trying to take a step back.
That's the hope.
Now, while the established diplomats are talking, there seems to be a new player on the board, something called the Board of Peace.
This is a U.S.-led initiative, and it's heavily associated with President Trump's administration, focused on the reconstruction of Gaza.
And the Europeans are not on board.
Hesitant is putting it very mildly. The Board of Peace is designed to essentially bypass the United Nations and other traditional international bodies. It's a much more unilateral, transactional approach.
So less international consensus, more we'll fund the rebuilding, but we run the show.
You could say it's the Trump real estate and business mindset applied to a post-conflict zone. We will build the hotels and the ports, but it will be done our way with our partners.
And for many European nations who are deeply wedded to the idea of international law and UN oversight, this is.
It's anathema. They see it as undermining the entire post-World War II global order. So many are refusing to join. And what you have is a major fracture developing in the Western alliance over the fundamental question of how to build peace.
And speaking of global fractures, there was a bombshell report about China an alleged secret nuclear test.
Yes. The U.S. is claiming that China conducted a very low-yield nuclear test in violation of international norms.
Define low yield. What does that mean?
It could mean a subcritical test, which doesn't produce a full chain reaction, or just a very, very small explosive yield.
Right.
We're not talking about a city-destroying weapon. We're talking about a test designed to gather data to refine their warhead designs.
So they're not just sitting on their old nukes. They're actively developing new ones.
That's the implication. It suggests China is modernizing its arsenal rapidly. They're likely building new, smaller, more tactical nuclear weapons. And if it's true, it means they're ignoring the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty.
It really feels like all the arms control guardrails that were put in place over the last 30 or 40 years are just rusting away and collapsing.
I think it's safe to say they're already gone. We are in a new era of unconstrained three-way competition between the U.S., Russia, and China.
And that competition for resources is also driving conflict in our own hemisphere. In South America, Argentina. The new president, Milei, is trying to change the country's glacier laws.
This is a classic green paradox. President Milei was elected on a promise to save Argentina's collapsing economy. To do that, he desperately needs foreign investment and export revenue.
And their big-ticket items are minerals.
Lithium and copper, the essential ingredients for the green energy transition, for electric car batteries. And where are those minerals located? Under the Andes Mountains. And more specifically, under and around the glaciers.
But the glaciers are the water source for the entire region.
They are the water source for agriculture and for the cities. The current law protects not just the glaciers themselves, but the periglacial environment, the delicate ecosystem of rock and frozen soil around the ice. Milei wants to amend that law to allow mining operations to move in.
So in order to get the lithium for the green electric cars of the future, they have to risk destroying the glaciers that provide drinking water to the people living there right now.
That is the brutal trade-off on the table, and the Argentine people are not having it. The unions have announced general strikes. It is a head-on collision between radical economic libertarianism and environmental reality.
We have covered a lot of heavy, heavy ground. I want to move to our final section, society and legacy. Because, people are still at the core of this entire chaotic system. And we lost a true giant this week.
Jesse Jackson passed away at the age of 84.
I feel like for a certain generation, maybe my generation, he's just this figure they remember seeing on TV. But his actual impact on American politics is.
It's foundational. It is impossible to imagine a President Barack Obama without the groundwork laid by Jesse Jackson. You don't get the modern, diverse Democratic Party without his Rainbow Coalition presidential campaigns in 1984 and 1988.
He really was the bridge between the Martin Luther King era of street-level civil rights activism and modern electoral politics.
He was. He took the energy of the movement from the streets and the marches directly to the ballot box. He proved that a black man could run a serious national campaign for president and win primary states. He fundamentally changed the psychology of American politics. A true trailblazer.
And on the complete flip side of legacy, the darkest side, we have another update on the Jeffrey Epstein files. The United Nations is now using very specific, very heavy language here, crimes against humanity.
That is not a term that lawyers or international bodies use lightly. That is the language of the Nuremberg trials after World War II. It refers to widespread systemic atrocities, things like slavery, torture, and enforced disappearance.
So why does that specific legal label matter so much?
It triggers a principle called universal jurisdiction. If a crime is officially designated a crime against humanity, it can be prosecuted by any country in the world, regardless of where it happened or the nationality of the perpetrator.
So it's not just a U.S. issue anymore.
Not at all. It means if a known associate of Epstein, someone implicated in the trafficking ring, lands in Spain or Germany or South Africa, they could theoretically be arrested and put on trial there under international law.
So for all the powerful people who thought this story would just blow over,
it means the world just got a lot smaller for them.
Yeah.
There is almost nowhere to hide from a crimes against humanity charge.
Justice grinds slow, but it grinds exceedingly fine.
Indeed.
Okay, I want to close with a math problem. Because after all of that, nothing soothes the soul like a little bit of pure number theory. The topic is digitally delicate primes.
I love this story. It's such a beautiful, nerdy concept.
Explain it to me. What on earth makes a prime number delicate?
Okay, so you know what a prime number is. It's only divisible by 1 in itself, 7, 13, 17, and so on.
Right.
A digitally delicate prime is a prime number, where if you change any single one of its digits to something else, turn a 7 into a 6 or a 0 into a 1, the number instantly stops being prime. It collapses.
Wait, just one digit anywhere in the number?
Just one. Any single digit. The number's primeness is fragile. It relies on every single digit being exactly what it is in the exact right place to maintain its special identity. Change one thing, and the whole property is lost.
That sounds like a perfect metaphor for single thing we've talked about today.
It really is, isn't it? Think about the moon. It changes its shape by just a few millimeters, a tiny change, and $1 billion lunar base could crack and fail.
Or think about the AI code. One flip bit in the weights of the neural network, one tiny change, and the intelligence just degrades into nonsense.
Think about that pattern of life data from Palantir. One anomaly in your daily routine, one digit changed in your life's code, and the algorithm flags you as a potential threat.
We live in these massive complex systems, geology, history, technology, geopolitics, and we think they're robust and solid. But they're actually all digitally delicate. They're incredibly fragile.
They all rely on thousands of tiny little things staying exactly in place. And as we've learned today, from the moon to the Americas to Argentina, nothing ever stays in place.
And that is the thought I want to leave you with today. If the moon is actively shrinking, and human history is 10,000 years older than we thought, and even the fundamental properties of prime numbers are fragile, what certainty in your own life is actually just one digit away from collapsing?
Is it your career? Your 5-year plan, the unspoken rules of your relationships, the borders of the country you live in?
The ground is moving. Keep your knees bent.
And stay curious.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to The Debate. Today we're looking at what might be the most dissonant split screen in modern history. I mean, you look at one half, and you see this financial and technological engine that is just roaring. Markets are rallying, NVIDIA is surging, and researchers are claiming a breakthrough in limitless energy. But then you look at the other half.
Exactly.
You look at the other half, and the traditional geopolitical map is being shredded. We have alleged secret nuclear tests, the Strait of Hormuz is being shut down for drills, and, diplomatic talks in Geneva seem to be collapsing before they even get started.
It's a dichotomy that feels completely schizophrenic. You look at your portfolio and you feel like we're entering a golden age. You look at the news out of the Middle East and it feels like the wheels are coming off the bus.
And that brings us to our core question for today. Are we entering a new era of, say, diversified global prosperity that's being driven by innovation? Or is all this resilience we're seeing in the markets just a mirage that's masking a systemic collapse of the international order?
I think the answer is staring us right in the face. I mean, I look at the failure of this board of peace, the stagnation in Geneva, the fragility of our tech, and I see a world that is rapidly losing its safety rails.
I see the friction, I do, but I interpret it differently. I believe the global system is actually showing a remarkable capacity for adaptation. We're seeing rational economic realignments that suggest nations are prioritizing survival and growth over, well, ideological suicide. But let's get into the evidence.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I want to start with the economic reality, because money often tells the truth that politics tries to hide. If you look at the markets right now, U.S. stock indices are rising ahead of the Fed minutes. That is a clear signal of confidence. And we aren't just talking about speculation here. This is tangible growth. Look at the United States. After all the doom and gloom predictions post-Brexit, all the volatility, the data shows the UK economy grew by 1.3% last year, right after a 1.1% expansion the year before.
It's a number, sure. But is that sustainable?
It's a trend, and it's a trend that's mirrored in how nations are pivoting diplomatically. We focus so much on where diplomacy is failing, but look at where it's working. Keir Starmer took a delegation of 60 senior British figures to Beijing. He secured billions in trade deals. That is pure pragmatism. Or look at the special global strategic partnership between India and France. They signed 20 agreements covering defense, critical minerals, space. This tells me that the underlying mechanism of the world, trade, innovation, investment is robust. Nations are choosing growth, not the apocalypse.
I'm sorry, but I think you're confusing market exuberance with structural stability. You mentioned markets pricing and growth. I see markets that are just completely detached from reality. You want to talk about signals? Let's look at the Munich Security Index. It's showing that a significant number of G7 countries now see the United States as a top security threat. That is a collapse of trust in the Western security umbrella that has supported the global economy for, 80 years? If the guarantor of global trade is seen as a threat, your trade deals are built on sand.
That's a heavy interpretation of that index, though.
It's the realist interpretation. And you talk about diplomacy like it's just evolving. I see it dying. Look at Geneva. Russia and Ukraine sit down for talks that last 2 hours. 2 hours, while missiles are actively flying. President Zelensky's reaction wasn't pragmatic optimism. He dismissed the Russian position, essentially saying he has no time for all this. That is not a functional system. And in the Middle East, Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. The Russian ambassador to Iran, Alexei Dadov, he explicitly said the U.S. and Israel have filled the region with time bombs. We are seeing the militarization of waterways, the collapse of dialogue. The economic figures we're citing are lagging indicators. The geopolitical time bombs are the leading ones.
I think that frames the tension perfectly. You see the cracks, I see the mortar being applied in new places. So let's dig into that first point, the state of diplomacy.
It's the most critical piece. You brought up the India-France deal as a sign of health, but I want to look at the flagship diplomatic initiative right now, this so-called Board of Peace for Gaza. It was supposed to be the grand solution, and what happened? Out of 60 invited countries, only 27 accepted the invitation. Major European nations just said no.
Well, it's a new initiative. These things take time to build consensus, especially when the methodology is different.
It's not just growing pains. It's a vote of no confidence. It shows the U.S. is isolated. And it's not just the attendance, it's the method. We're shifting to what I would call diplomacy without diplomats. You have the administration relying on personal envoys, family members like Jared Kushner, to handle existential crises in Iran and Ukraine because the State Department is sidelined. That is dangerous amateurism. When you have a crisis in the Strait of Hormuz, you need career diplomats, not a personal envoy with a real estate background.
I see why you'd frame it that way, but I would argue it's a shift toward multipolar efficiency. You're looking for the old liberal international order to solve problems it clearly failed to prevent. I'm looking at where the energy is actually flowing. The Board of Peace might be stumbling, sure, but look at the BRICS nations. They are pushing a cohesive narrative around the UN's Sustainable Development Goals as a viable model for the Global South. That is functional diplomacy. It's just not centered in Washington.
But is it benevolent? Or is it predatory?
It's effective. The India-France summit in Mumbai is a perfect example. They didn't just shake hands. They signed deals on co-development of defense tech. Or look at Mexico and Canada tightening economic ties to bypass U.S. friction. This is the world adapting. The diplomatic machinery isn't broken. The old machine is just being replaced by pragmatic networks that don't rely on a single hegemon.
That sounds nice in theory, but these alternative alliances are often rife with instability. Just look at Peru. Congress just voted to remove interim President José Joffre 4 months into his term. And why? Allegations of corruption over undisclosed meetings with Chinese companies. When you bypass transparent frameworks for these pragmatic deals, you import corruption. You don't get order, you get graft. And that graft topples governments. So this new diplomacy isn't fixing anything, it's just exporting chaos.
Chaos is one way to look at it. Dynamism is another, which I think brings us to the engine that overrides a lot of this political friction, the high-tech economy. We are seeing developments right now that fundamentally change the resource scarcity equation.
You're talking about the limitless energy headline?
I am. Researchers have announced a breakthrough that could open the door to a new generation of energy sources. If we're moving toward energy abundance, a lot of the geopolitical conflicts you're worried about, which are, resource wars, they become obsolete. And it's not just that. Look at the capital flowing. A massive Indian data company partnering with Google and Microsoft investing heavily in AI infrastructure. SpaceX veterans raising $50 million for a startup to revolutionize data centers. The markets are betting billions on a high-tech, high-efficiency future.
I come at this from a completely different angle. You see tech as the savior, I see it as the vulnerability. You talk about AI and data centers like they're secure. Did you see the news about Palantir?
The alleged hack.
It's not just an alleged hack. Palantir builds the software that organizes data for the CIA, the Pentagon. They are the AI overlords of surveillance, and they were breached. If the system designed to watch everyone can't even watch its own back, then the foundation of this high-tech security state is rotten. And it's not just Palantir. A hacker showed he could compromise ChatGPT and Google's AI in 20 minutes.
Security vulnerabilities are part of any technological maturation. You patch, you improve, you move on.
But the stakes are different now. We aren't talking about stealing credit card numbers. We're talking about military intelligence. And look at the regulatory chaos. The European Parliament just blocked AI on lawmakers' devices because of security risks. The EU is investigating Shein for selling weapons. This isn't a utopia of efficiency. It's a Wild West where the tech is creating security chaos that governments can't keep up with.
That's a compelling point on risk. But what about the productivity gains that offset it? Yes, the Palantir breach is serious. But look at the broader application. We have automated farm tractors becoming mainstream, WordPress is adding AI assistance, new memory architectures are being developed to solve the von Neumann bottleneck, which will make AI exponentially more efficient. These tools are deflationary. They drive productivity. That's why U.S. inflation has slowed to 2.4%. The market sees a solvable bug. It sees a permanent upgrade to human capacity.
Productivity doesn't matter if the physical infrastructure is being blown up, and that pivots us to the hardest reality, the one the stock market seems to be ignoring: escalation.
You mean the time bombs?
I mean, the nuclear shadow. The U.S. has released details claiming China conducted a secret nuclear test. This isn't just trade competition anymore. This is the erosion of the test ban norm. And look at the Scarborough Shoal, Chinese Coast Guard drones harassing vessels. It's a physical conflict. We have Turkey's President Erdogan making comments that sound like he's reconsidering their non-nuclear stance. We are seeing the unraveling of the non-proliferation consensus.
I'm not convinced, because despite the scary headlines, the behavior remains rational. The U.S. accuses China of a secret test, and what happens? Trade continues. Keir Starmer is in Beijing signing deals. If nuclear war was imminent, you wouldn't see Tesla putting capital assets on the ground there. These are managed tensions. It's posturing. Even in the Middle East, with all the time bombs rhetoric, the U.S. and Iran are holding indirect talks. They are still talking. The system bends, it creaks, but it doesn't break.
It bends until it snaps. And you're ignoring the physical stressors. Look at the climate data. A new study shows climate change is threatening the world's key coffee-growing regions. That means a lower supply, higher costs. Communities in Louisiana are fighting blue ammonia plants because of pollution.
Those feel like localized issues, though, separate from global conflict.
They are systemic stressors. When you combine a climate crisis that shrinks resources with a geopolitical crisis like the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, you get an explosion. The Russian ambassador's comment about time bombs isn't a metaphor. It's about the lack of exit ramps. We have drone strikes in Sudan killing people in a market. We have the Gaza death toll topping 72,000. These aren't managed tensions. These are hot conflicts bleeding into the global economy. You can't AI your way out of a closed shipping lane.
But history shows we can innovate our way out of constraints. The limitless energy breakthrough, if it's real, changes the entire climate calculation. The economic integration of the global south creates new markets not dependent on the Strait of Hormuz. I look at the resilience of the UK economy or the surge in NVIDIA, and it tells me that humanity is betting on its ability to solve these problems. We are seeing a rebalancing, not an ending. The noise is loud, but the signal is progress.
And I fear that signal is a siren song. When the U.S. is seen as a threat by its allies, when the board of peace is just empty chairs, and when diplomacy is conducted by family members, the margin for error becomes zero. The disconnect between a rallying stock market and a burning world, it's just not sustainable. Eventually, reality collects its due.
As we wrap up, I think it's clear we are looking at the same world through very different lenses. I see a world that is messy, yes, but it's fundamentally reorganizing itself around new centers of power and new technologies. The shift to places like India and the relentless pace of innovation offer a path out of the current darkness. The markets are betting on ingenuity.
And I see a world where the institutions that kept us safe for 80 years are crumbling, and we haven't built anything to replace them. The risk is systemic. When you have nuclear proliferation fears and diplomacy that's ignored by the combatants on the ground, we are walking a tightrope without a net. My advice? Don't just watch the stock ticker. Watch the silent diplomatic exits in Geneva. Watch the Strait of Hormuz.
And I would say watch the energy breakthroughs and the trade deals being made in Mumbai. That's where the future is being built. And that is all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening to The Debate.
Stay safe out there.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.